David Letterman's watch stopped working when James Dean walked onto the stage in 1985, 30 years after the world thought he'd died. Paul Schaefer's hands froze on the keyboard. The audience went silent, then erupted into chaos. Because the man who sat down in that guest chair looked exactly like James Dean, sounded exactly like James Dean, and claimed to be James Dean. What happened in the next 17 minutes wasn't just bizarre. It was impossible, and it would become the most controversial episode in late-night television history the night someone convinced millions of Americans that James Dean had faked his death and been hiding for 3 decades. It was a Friday night in October 1985, and Late Night with David Letterman was preparing for what should have been a normal episode. The show had been on the air for 4 years now, building its reputation as the edgy, unpredictable alternative to traditional talk shows. David Letterman, 38 years old with his signature gap-toothed grin and curly brown hair, sat behind his wooden desk in Studio 6A at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, going through his notes. The monologue was ready. Paul Schaefer and the band were warmed up. The audience was settled in their seats. Everything was proceeding normally until Letterman's producer rushed over during a commercial break, his face pale. "Dave, we have a situation," the producer said, his voice shaking slightly. "What kind of situation?" Letterman asked, immediately concerned. "There's a man backstage who claims to be James Dean." Letterman blinked. "James Dean the actor? The guy who died in 1955? That's the one. And he claims to be alive? Not just alive. He claims he's been in hiding for 30 years, and he's ready to come forward. And Dave, he looks exactly like him. I mean exactly. Same face, same build, same voice. It's uncanny." Letterman stared at his producer. "This is a joke, right? Someone doing an impression?" "I don't think so. He's got documentation, photos, stories, details about Dean's life that aren't public knowledge. And he's demanding to go on air tonight. Says if we don't let him tell his story, he'll go to another network." Letterman felt a strange mix of skepticism and curiosity. "Have you verified any of this?" "There's no time. He showed up an hour ago. Security almost didn't let him in, but then he showed them something, some kind of proof, and they brought him to me. Dave, I don't know what this is, but it could be the biggest story in entertainment history, or it could be the biggest hoax. Either way, it's going to be incredible television." Letterman thought for a moment. His instinct told him this was probably an elaborate prank or a delusional impersonator, but his curiosity and his sense of showmanship won out. "Okay," Letterman said, "let's do it. But if this goes sideways, it's on you." "Understood," the producer said. 30 seconds, the stage manager called out. Letterman took a deep breath and looked into the camera as the red light blinked on. He decided to play it straight, let the audience discover this along with him. "Welcome back," Letterman said, his voice carrying a strange tension. "What I'm about to tell you is going to sound insane, and I'm not entirely sure I believe it myself. But a man has come to our studio tonight making an extraordinary claim. He says he's James Dean, the actor who supposedly died in a car crash in 1955, and he wants to tell his story. So, with absolutely no idea what's about to happen, please welcome this man who claims to be James Dean." The audience laughed nervously, thinking this was a comedy bit. Some people looked confused, others excited. Paul Schaefer hit a mysterious, suspenseful chord on the keyboard, and the band played a slow, dramatic introduction. And from backstage, moving with a cautious, almost shy energy, a man walked out. The audience gasped collectively. Some people screamed. Others sat in stunned silence, because the man who walked onto that stage looked like James Dean had stepped out of a time machine. He appeared to be in his early 50s, with graying hair that had once been sandy blonde, worn in that classic Dean style. His face, though aged and weathered, had the same bone structure, the same jawline, the same intense eyes. He wore jeans, a white t-shirt, and a red windbreaker, echoing the iconic look from Rebel Without a Cause. He moved like Dean moved, with that mixture of confidence and vulnerability that coiled energy barely contained. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. A few people clapped uncertainly. Most just stared. The man reached Letterman, who had stood up, his face showing complete bewilderment. They shook hands. The man's grip was firm, but his hand was trembling slightly. "Thank you for having me," the man said, and his voice was Dean's voice, that distinctive Midwestern drawl with a slight mumble. I don't know what to call you," Letterman said honestly. "You can call me Jim," the man said. "That's what my friends called me." They sat down. The man settled into the guest chair, and even the way he sat, slightly hunched, arms crossed, one leg bouncing nervously, was pure James Dean. Letterman looked at him, then at the audience, then back at him. "Okay, I'm just going to ask the obvious question. Are you claiming to be James Dean, the actor who died in 1955? I'm not claiming anything," the man said quietly. "I am James Dean, and I didn't die in 1955. I faked my death." The audience erupted into noise. Some people were laughing, thinking this was an elaborate joke. Others were shouting questions. A few looked genuinely disturbed. Letterman held up his hands for quiet. Okay, let's just hear him out. Why would James Dean fake his own death?" The man took a deep breath. His hands were still trembling. "Because I couldn't breathe anymore. The fame, the pressure, the studio owning every piece of me. I was 24 years old, and I felt like I was 100. I was trapped in this image of the rebel, the troubled youth, the method actor, and I couldn't escape it." He looked down at his hands. "So I staged the car crash. I had help from people I can't name. We made it look like I died, and I disappeared." Letterman was leaning forward now, completely focused. "You're saying you've been alive for 30 years? Where have you been?" "Everywhere and nowhere," the man said. "I worked on farms in Mexico. I lived in a small town in Montana under a different name. I was a mechanic in Oregon. I've been living as a normal person, doing normal work, being anonymous, and it's been the most peaceful 30 years of my life. Why come forward now?" Letterman asked. The man's eyes were wet. "Because I'm dying. I have lung cancer, 6 months, maybe less. And before I go, I wanted people to know the truth. I wanted to tell my story. I wanted to explain why I did what I did." The studio was absolutely silent now. Even the skeptics were riveted. What he said next would make millions question everything. The man leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, just like Dean used to do in interviews. "Do you know what it's like to become a symbol? To have millions of people project their fantasies onto you? To have studio executives tell you how to walk, how to talk, how to live your life because you're their investment?" His voice was getting rougher, more emotional. "I made 3 movies. 3. East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, and Giant. And they turned me into this mythical figure, this icon of teenage rebellion and alienation. But I wasn't a rebel. I was just a kid from Indiana who wanted to act. I wanted to tell stories, play characters, explore the human condition." He paused, his jaw working. "But they didn't care about that. They cared about selling tickets. They cared about the image. So they manufactured this persona, this troubled bad boy, and they made me live it. Every interview, every appearance, every photograph had to reinforce the myth. And I started to lose myself in it." Letterman was completely still, just listening. "I couldn't go anywhere without being mobbed," the man continued. "I couldn't have a normal conversation without it ending up in a gossip column. I couldn't date someone without the studio approving it. I couldn't even drive my own car without photographers following me." His voice cracked. "So I decided to die, because that was the only way to escape. That was the only way to get my life back." The audience was mesmerized. Some people were crying. Others looked angry, feeling betrayed if this was true, or fooled if it wasn't. Letterman spoke carefully. "I have to ask, and I think everyone's wondering, can you prove any of this? Can you prove you're actually James Dean?" The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, he extracted several old photographs and placed them on Letterman's desk. "These are photos from my childhood. Photos that were never published, never released to the public. Photos only my family would have." Letterman picked them up, examined them. They showed a young boy who did indeed look like a young James Dean. But photographs could be faked, especially old ones. "Do you have anything else?" Letterman asked. The man rolled up his sleeve, exposing his forearm. There was a distinctive scar, shaped like a crescent moon. "I got this scar when I was 16, working on my uncle's farm. I got caught on a piece of farm equipment. There are photos of me from my early acting days where you can see this scar if you look closely. It's in a scene from East of Eden, visible for just a few frames." Paul Schaefer spoke up from his keyboard, something he rarely did during interviews. "I've seen every James Dean movie 100 times. There is a scar visible in that movie. I remember it." The audience murmured. The skepticism was starting to crack. Just a little. Letterman looked at the man intensely. "Tell me something only James Dean would know. Something that's never been made public." The man smiled slightly sadly. On the set of Rebel Without a Cause, director Nicholas Ray and I used to have these late-night conversations about the meaning of the film. One night, around 3 a.m., I told him I was scared that if I died young, people would turn me into a martyr instead of remembering me as an actor. He laughed and said, "Jim, you're going to live to be 90 and complain about being forgotten." And I said, "I'd rather be forgotten at 90 than turned into a commodity at 25. He paused. "Turns out I got what I wished for, in a way." Letterman sat back, his expression unreadable. "That's a very specific story." "It's true," the man said. "Every word." And then he revealed something that would haunt everyone watching. The man stood up slowly and walked toward the front of the stage. "Whether you believe I'm James Dean or not doesn't really matter," he said. "What matters is the truth about fame and what it does to people." He spoke about young actors turned into commodities, packaged and sold, their private lives treated as public property, their worth measured in numbers. "I watch kids in their 20s being chewed up by the same machine that almost destroyed me," he said. "Some of them won't survive it. Some of them will die young. And when they do, the industry will mourn them publicly while quietly profiting from the tragedy. That's why I left," he continued. "I saw the future waiting for me. Burnout, addiction, a tragic ending that would make everyone money but me. I refused to give them that story, so I disappeared." "If I'm really James Dean," he said, "then you've spent decades mourning a myth, a poster, a symbol, not the human being behind it. And if I'm not, if I'm just a man telling a convincing story, then that proves my point even more. You wanted to believe, because the myth is safer than the truth." He returned to the chair, exhausted. "Either way," he said quietly, "the industry wins, and the person gets lost." Letterman admitted he didn't know what to believe. "But what you're saying about fame," he said, "that rings painfully true." The man looked straight into the camera. "Fame isn't freedom. It's a prison. Once you're inside that machine, the only way out is to disappear or be destroyed. I chose to disappear. Most people don't get that choice." They shook hands. The applause that followed was uncertain, conflicted, part awe, part confusion. The man thanked the audience and walked off stage. Backstage, he vanished into the New York night. After the break, Letterman explained that his staff couldn't verify the man's identity. Some details aligned with James Dean's life, others didn't. "I don't know if that was James Dean," Letterman said honestly, "but the truth he spoke about fame, about the cost of celebrity, that stands, regardless of who he was." The show ended there. The next morning, NBC was flooded with calls. Anger, belief, obsession. Investigations led nowhere. The man was never found. The episode was archived and never officially released. Years later, Letterman was asked if he thought it had really been James Dean. "I don't know," he said, "and I don't think it matters. What matters is the warning." In Letterman's office hangs a still from that night, beneath a single line. "Does it matter? Does it change what I said?" And the question remains, was he James Dean, using the last of his life to expose the machine that nearly destroyed him? Or someone else entirely, wearing the myth to tell a deeper truth? Perhaps the answer doesn't matter. The message does. Fame is a trap. Celebrity is a cage. And sometimes the only way to win is to disappear before the machine destroys you.